Yeah. So the documents serve as like, you know, they're primary sources through testimonies. The documents are, you know, backing up sort of everything that Carlos was telling me.
Yeah. What was that document you sent Steve?
Yeah, Steve, if you can pull it up. I sent 2 documents. Let's see which one is this one. So this one is from Francis Mullen. He was the administrator of the DEA in 1984. This is a letter of correspondence directly to Noriega. So if you notice, there's it's gratitude, right? I commend you for your initiative, and I look forward to our continued working relationship and our mutual endeavors. This is from the administrator of the DEA in 1984.
Francis Mullen.
Yeah. And I've got hundreds of these letters in the book, you know. So you see it says ether.
Wow.
So ether ethyl is a component in cocaine production, and drums of ether used to pass through the Panama Canal on shipping containers coming from Germany. That was like one of the main countries where a lot of this stuff came from. It used to pass through, and it used to come to Colombia. Or somewhat like Peru and Chile and basically everywhere in South America, because the other ingredients came from like Bolivia and like all that sort of stuff. It just like all converged in this one region. And yeah, so it was like Panama's job basically to detect when ethyl used to come through the Panama Canal. So that explains that. And then this is another, I've got, like I said, hundreds of these, but this is from Arthur Cedillo. He wasn't like an administrator, but his job was to like communicate with Panama, with Noriega. Colonel Noriega, this is, talking about this guy, Orlando Cabos Escaraja, fugitive from New York office, took place in 1975. So there was constant monitoring. You know what I mean? Like information was being shared constantly between Panama and the United States through Noriega. The interesting thing about this is that this is from 1978, and Noriega wasn't even the leader of Panama. In 1978, it was Omar Torrijos. So, and I'll tie this in, but there's a major conspiracy in this whole story that in 1981, the leader before Noriega, Omar Torrijos, was mysteriously killed in a plane crash. And afterwards, Noriega becomes the leader of Panama.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember this.
Yeah. So
who did we have on that was talking about this?
Either Sheehan?
No, it wasn't Sheehan. It was the gentleman who was the guy who was he was going from country to country, convincing the leaders of other governments.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yes.
John Perkins.
What?
Perkins?
Yeah, yes, that's Perkins. Who it was. Yes, the economic hitman. He was partying with these guys.
Yeah.
And he basically said it without saying it, that the CIA basically made his plane crash.
Popped him. Yeah, so there's two trains of thought, both of which involve Noriega being involved in the assassination, that the CIA basically said, hey, Manuel, take care.
Because he wasn't willing to play ball with the U.S.
No, because Omar Torrijos was a socialist. He was like a Maduro or like a Castro. He had left-leaning ideals, and he had a complex relationship with the CIA in the United States because there were 2 coups in the late 1960s. It was 68 and 69. In 68, it was this guy Boris Martinez and Omar Torrijos who overthrew Arnulfo Arias, the leader before, who was like an American-backed leader. The US were basically just waiting to see who ultimately came out on top. And when they saw that it was those 2 guys, they were like, well, we're going to choose Boris Martinez because Omar Torrijos is a socialist. He doesn't share the same values as America does. So Torrijos is sent away. Torrijos is in Mexico, and Boris Martinez announces himself as like the leader. There's a little bit more to it, but basically Martinez becomes the leader. And then Noriega, Carlos was there too. It's all in the book, but Carlos and Noriega and a group of guys sneak Torrijos back into the country. They go to an empty airstrip in the Chiriquí province in Panama, which is close to like Costa Rica. They fly Omar Torrijos back in. They use their headlights on their cars to light up the airstrip. No lights. Flies in. They take Torrijos. They come back. There's another coup in 1969 where Torrijos comes out on top. After 1969, when Torrijos is the leader of Panama, he refuses to communicate directly with the CIA, because he knew that the CIA didn't want him in power and actively tried to overthrow him.
Right.
So instead of communicating with Torrijos, the CIA communicated with Noriega, his head of intelligence. So take takes us to 1981, where Torrijos dies in the plane crash. Two frames of thought, whatever you say.
Wasn't his whole family on the plane too?
No, it was
just him.
I think it might have been his wife as well, but there wasn't a lot of people on the plane. But Torrijos, they said his plane crashed into the side of a mountain. Carlos said he was there at the wreckage and he saw that it did crash into the mountain.
He was there.
Some people say that his plane, eyewitness reports say that they saw his plane explode in midair, and then the other sort of conspiracy is that this, and I spoke to an air traffic controller about this, that back then, or maybe now, but back then when you had low visibility, the plane sort of had this almost like sonar system where there are like beacons all over the country that they like sort of project these like sonar images, so you could see like the outlines of things. So you could see like the outline of like these mountains, right, on your like sonar device within the cockpit. Whatever, I'm not doing it justice, but you know what, you kind of get what I'm saying. But if this air traffic controller was like, if you move one of these beacons, it projects a different image on your sonar device, like within the cockpit. And a lot of people think that the beacons were moved for Torrijos' flight intentionally so that the mountain that they crashed into appeared further away than it actually was. And so they just flew right into the mountain on it like a foggy day. Now,
what a great way to do it.
That being said, there's obviously more to it. I'm sure somebody listening to this will do their research or have read a book and they're like, oh, Cillian, like you missed this, you missed that. But the coming back to the outcomes, what was the outcome of this?
Right.
The CIA's guy steps into power in 1983. He steps into power, and then all of a sudden, they don't have the middleman to worry about anymore. They don't have to worry about Torrijos, the guy that they don't communicate with at all. They only communicate with Noriega. So now they're communicating with the de facto leader, the dictator of Panama. And if they want something done, they just go right to the source.
Wow.
Interesting, right? Like it's an old story that I think it highlights the framework that the CIA used to use with like all of their sort of foreign affairs or whatnot, like with Saddam Hussein and stuff, like building someone up, using them, and then taking them out, like weapons of mass destruction, like that whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope I did that justice. But
wild
that's
shit, bro.
Yeah. Fidel Castro overthrew the Cuban Republic in 1959. Supposedly, he had help from the CIA to do that, right? I think the CIA might deny that, but I do know that at the time there was, according to Carlos and according to the people that I interviewed, like there was like some funding going into Castro's campaign. But then when Castro came into power, obviously he was a socialist, communist, like he was an extreme leftist. The US wanted him out immediately, so the Bay of Pigs and all that sort of stuff happened.
The original Cuban Revolution, there's evidence that the CIA was part of that?
It's interesting. Yeah, so primary sources told me that in Panama, right? And I call them primary sources because they said they heard it directly from Castro, and Castro told them this directly. But one really interesting thing as well is
who said Castro, not like a source that you can't talk about? Or
no, I can talk about. So Carlos told me that, and then this guy Trujillo told me that as well. Trujillo is so while I was in Panama, I hunted down several hundred previously I guess they're technically declassified, but they're previously published documents that highlight correspondence between Noriega, the CIA, DEA, and Department of Justice, stemming back from the early 1970s right up until 1987. And they essentially they tell the story of Noriega's relationship with the United States, where the United States has always been pretty honest about the fact that Noriega was an intelligence asset for the Americans, and how he was tasked with curbing the drug trade that was coming out of Colombia for a very long time. What they never sort of let on people to believe, or what they never sort of revealed, was just how important he was and how much gratitude they gave him and how many favors they asked of him. So I hunted down these several hundred documents from this guy Trujillo, who Noriega gave them to him in the 1990s, and Trujillo considers himself...
He held on to them.
Held on to them,
wow.
Yeah. He considers himself to be a historian. He was the mayor of Panama City in the early 2000s, I think. But he held on to them. It's over 200 of these documents, and then there were like another 200 pages of these like international human rights organization reports. There's like archived articles from like the New York Times, the Washington Post, things that just show that the story isn't exactly what has been told to us.
Well, it fits in perfectly with every other story around it. Like the United States putting people in power while they're useful for the United States, and then when they're no longer useful, getting rid of them and disposing of them.
Yep, and that's the theme of the book, right? The theme of the book is that this is a framework for how the CIA and the United States operates all around the world, right? They pick... the book shows how and why they pick a foreign strongman or a leader, how and why they build him up, how and why they use that person to get what they want, and how and why they discard of them when they have no more use, right?
Right.
And it's a framework. Like you could apply that to Augusto Pinochet in Chile. You could apply it to Saddam Hussein. You could apply it to even like the Shah of Iran, right? In 1953, there was a coup to overthrow the Shah. It was Shah Reza's father, I believe, that the coup tried to overthrow, and then the United States were basically just like, no, we don't want someone else in there, because between the US and the UK, the oil coming out of Iran was just too important. What we now know as BP, I forget what it used to be called, but they felt really threatened. Iran essentially wanted like ownership over their own oil production, right? So the US funds the Shah and keeps him in power until the Ayatollahs overthrow him in 1979, right? So it's just one instance, but the Noriega thing
Gaddafi
is,
too, right?
Gaddafi was another one, and Noriega and Gaddafi were super close. Like in 1988 and 1989, Noriega had a feeling that, because Noriega was indicted by the US government in 1988, which essentially, for any listeners, it just means he was accused of these things, but like officially accused. So Noriega was obviously worried that the US were going to come for him, as they had just done in Grenada like 5 or 6 years prior. And he used to call Gaddafi like once a week, and they would chat about the US government, and Gaddafi would give him advice. That's what Carlos told me. And then Fidel Castro used to give Noriega advice like all the time. Because in Latin America, a lot of these like socialists, like left leading leaders, like Noriega he didn't really have a stance. He really just was like a strong man. Like he was all about power, ego, influence. And also like he really just wanted that power, right? But a lot of these left leaders really look up to Castro because they see Castro as the only guy who took on the United States and won. Like the United States never overthrew Cuba. But look at all these other countries that the United States like really tried to and did,
Yeah, Kennedy kind of pulled the plug on that, kind of with the Bay of Pigs. I think they were supposed to send air support, and he never did. And that was one of the main reasons I think he got whacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. The whole history of South America is just so bananas. Was there any, did he ever have anything to do with, or ever meet with Che Guevara?
No, I asked. Yeah, I asked because actually Irish people love Che Guevara.
They love him?
Yeah, because Che Guevara's Irish blood, and he actually visited Ireland a couple times, and Ireland's like, historically speaking, it leans to the left a little bit. It's changing a little bit now. I think I actually haven't lived there for about 10 years. I've lived in the States for the majority of that time, but yeah, man, Che Guevara, I think it's on his mom's side that he's got like Irish blood, and there's a lot of weird connections between.
It's crazy how he's become like this popular cultural hero icon. I don't know how that happened. Was that Rage Against the Machine that made that happen?
I don't know, dude.
Yeah.
I think about that, and I just think that he's
a monster.
I think he's just like this handsome dude who had his face painted everywhere. And I think people just like naturally gravitated toward someone with so much conviction.
Somebody was on the show who knew him. I can't remember who it was now, but they were telling us a story about how in Cuba there was basically all these families that were in line to get clothes or food or something somewhere, and he was like patrolling it, and there was like this kid was crying, and the mother was there. And he went and like approached the mom, and he's like, tell your kid to shut up, stop crying. He's like, he's hungry. And then Che Guevara went, okay, grabbed the kid by his hair and blew his head off right in front of his mom. He's he's not hungry anymore.
Jesus, dude.
Was that wow. Felix Rodriguez?
That might have been Felix.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I can't say I know too much about even like the Cuban Revolution itself. While I was there, somebody handed me a book about the Bay of Pigs and they said, this should be your next story. That's why I said I wanted to go to Cuba while I was in Panama. But it just didn't work out. And I think it's interesting, but I know nothing about it other than what Carlos has told me about his relationship with Fidel Castro, which when it comes to intelligence and how that sort of all worked during the Cold War, like Fidel Castro knew that in order to sort of stay where he was, he divulged information to American intelligence agencies all the time, but through Noriega, right? And through all these other leaders. It was never like really direct correspondence, but like Noriega and Castro were tight, you know? For instance, when Castro needed like sensitive US intelligence about what was going on in Latin America, like he would call Noriega and say, hey, what's going on? And Noriega would divulge the information. So Noriega was, you know, obviously he flipped all the time, and I think the US kind of knew that, but they genuinely needed him because the drug trade coming out of Colombia with like the Ochoas and Escobar in the 1980s was just like, or late 1970s and the 1980s, especially the 80s, was just so strong and such a threat that Noriega was like a necessary evil for a long time.
So for people who aren't familiar with it, can you explain specifically what he was doing to facilitate all the drug trade?
Yeah. So in I believe it was 1973, the DEA is created, maybe 1972, but 73, the drug trade is like really kicking off, and the United States government recognizes the drug trade coming out of Colombia as like a super serious issue, right? Something that like really is like a problem. Where before that, the spread of communism was sort of like the biggest problem the US government had. Now the drug trade was. So Escobar and the Ochoas and the cartel were, you know, just generating a lot more money, and their routes to the United States were becoming a lot more complex, and drugs were sneaking in to the country. So Noriega recognizes that this is a problem for the US, and advantageously, he becomes like the guy to curb drug trades between Latin America and the United States. In 1973, he actually gives a speech to the UN about the threat of the drug trade. He calls drugs the fifth horseman of the apocalypse. This is documented. I have the article in my book. Like, it's there, right? This is 1973, 16 years before the United States invasion of Panama, 15 years before they indict him for, you know, racketeering and money laundering and drug smuggling, okay? So Noriega has been on this for a while. And as the years progress in the 1970s, the drug trade like just rapidly increases. I know this because the now declassified documents that I have from the DEA show the numerical figures drastically increasing over the years. These letters explicitly say, we caught this guy in this location with this much cocaine, right? And the Panama Canal being the nucleus of all of this, right? So many drugs used to pass through the Panama Canal. And the United States owned the canal, right? US troops were on canal territory, but they had Noriega and the National Guard sort of, you know, take care of it, okay? I like to say that when the United States needed their trash taken out in Central America and Latin America, they called Noriega, okay? Because they didn't really want to do it themselves. So the 1980s roll around, 1983 specifically, Noriega becomes the dictator of Panama. Escobar and the Ochoas they're just, you know, becoming way richer. The drug trade is just like intensifying so much more. And in 1984, Escobar has a politician assassinated. I know his last name was Bonilla. I forget Rodrigo Bonilla, maybe.
The commerce guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in 1984. And Escobar has to flee Colombia, and Noriega takes him in. Right, he takes him into Panama. The reason that he gave was that the previous dictator of Panama, Omar Torrijos, was really good friends with Escobar, and that he didn't really want to take him in, but he did, right? So Noriega's like playing all parties in this situation, and he just becomes strong through his like relationships. So the DEA recognized that this drug trade is drastically increasing. All of the facts and figures are showing that there are so many more drugs coming into the US, right? Specifically through Florida, through Texas, basically just anywhere with a coastline in the Gulf of Mexico, like you're, you know, all of these places, and also these airstrips in like Texas and Louisiana, like, you know, the movie like American Made with Tom Cruise. Yeah. So these guys, like these CIA pilots, were loading up their planes with drugs from Escobar's guys, and they had these routes down, right?
We had the pilot who hired Barry Seal on the show.
No way.
Yeah.
What did he have to say?
Oh my God, it was incredible. He was just telling all the stories about how the first day he hired him, and then how Barry flipped on him and brought him to dinner. Basically, the whole story ended where they're in Santa Monica, I think, and Barry's like, "Hey, I want to meet for dinner or whatever." And he's meeting for dinner with him, and then they're talking, and like Barry breaks down in tears, and they're in this room. And he's looking around, and he's like, "Barry, are these all FBI agents?" He goes, "Yeah, every single one of them." And then the FBI guy comes sits down at the table with him, and he goes, "Roger, that's the guy who hired Barry." He's like, "You got two choices. You can ride first class with us back to Miami tomorrow morning with your wife, or you can come back in handcuffs. Your choice is yours." He ended up doing like, I think he did like 40 something years in like 8 different prisons because he escaped. He escaped 6 or 7 prisons.
Holy shit.
He ended up doing most of his time in Australia because that was one of like the most like maximum security prisons that he couldn't escape. But dude, it was a wild story. He was flying back and forth he was like a pilot in his teenage years, in his early 20s, with some sort of like ministry. And then he moved to California, working for the fire department. And then one day, one guy just like said, "Hey man, I heard you fly airplanes." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to make $1 million this weekend?" And he's like, "Hell yeah." So we ended up doing this once a week in one trip back to Mexico, $1 million. Started out with weed and then graduated up to cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit, dude. Well, yeah, I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's nuts. So, I mean, all of that, like all of these stories, it's just like one giant spider web, right? But when it comes to, like, I guess the, like Noriega being at like the center of it all, it really just, it's about all those relationships that he cultivated. So he was playing all parties. So he was playing the DEA by saying, "Hey, we're going to curb this drug trade," right? So, which he genuinely did. Like there was a whole group, it was called the DENI within Panama. I forget what the acronym stands for, but you know, it was to curb the drug trade. Then Noriega, you know, this is why he went to prison and why the US invasion of Panama happened, but he was sort of allowing some stuff to come through Colombia, to my knowledge, right? Carlos never admitted to any of this, by the way. This was all me doing my own investigations. People obviously know this, and you know, it's naive to think that a guy like Noriega like never benefited from the illicit drug trade coming out of Latin America. Like that's just like childish, you know, even though they all claim that he didn't, even though there wasn't actually that much proof. But then as well as that, so he was benefiting monetarily from Latin America, the drug trade. He was on the CIA payroll, DEA payroll. He was just working all sides, and he, in my opinion, like was sort of a mastermind at just like balancing his relationships. So as the drug trade continued to increase, like more shit's coming out of Colombia and Latin America, more shit's getting to the US, the DEA is getting more funding. Nancy Reagan announces the war on drugs. Like drugs is just, it's becoming such a problem in the US. It genuinely is. Like it's just, drugs are piling in through the country. Noriega just, he's like their guy, right? He's their guy. He's closest to Colombia. Panama's right next to it. He's curbing as much as he can, but he's benefiting from it. And it escalates until the Iran-Contra affair. And that was the turning point. So the mid-1980s, like Noriega's like the best friend of the DEA in the United States government in Latin America, arguably the world, right? He is like their closest ally, somebody that's acting upon their interests. Yeah, he might be taking his own cut like those pilots, right? But he's serving the US government. And then the Iran-Contra affair happens. The US has egg on their face. It's the greatest public embarrassment for the United States government ever, at least in televised history, where the general public knows what's going on, and they need a scapegoat. And Noriega became that scapegoat because in 1984, Poindexter and Oliver North. Do you know those names?
Yep.
Those guys? Yeah. Poindexter and Oliver North come to Panama. They sit down with Noriega. They say, hey, we're losing this fight in Nicaragua. The Contras are losing. We need you to train the Contras here in Panama. We need you to send Panamanian troops to Nicaragua to fight against the Sandinistas. And we need you to help us stop the spread of communism in Nicaragua. And Noriega said no. He said no. And then that was the turning point. Everything changed after that. You go to Panama and you spend time there and you look around and you look at all these banks. Like, are you familiar with the banking system in Panama? And
Not
like,
really.
it's like the Switzerland of the Americas. So people go there people have traditionally gone there to wash money and launder money.
Panama.
Yeah, Panama. Have you heard of the Panama Papers? It was like it essentially was like a revelation of like all the people and companies and corporations around the world that were using Panama as a hub to launder their money. It's a very taboo subject, which I've been told that if I thoroughly investigate it, I will find a bullet in my head.
Really?
That's what I was told. Yeah.
By who?
By I can't say his name, but somebody in Panama who's very close with the banking system. And he said, if you want to do this story, if you've got he said, if you have the balls to do this story, he's like, there's a good chance you'll end up with a bullet in your head. And so it's still very relevant, right? But the banking system is a product of the canal. Like, everything comes back to the canal in Panama. But the banking system was created in the 1970s. And it was taken advantage of by the cartels and also by like people in America to launder and wash their money, because it was outside of like the American banking system. And also there were like there were sort of like free regulations, like free laws. And I forget where I was exactly going with this, but it's heavily ties to sort of all the stuff with the Iran-Contra affair, because the Americans were washing money there too. And if you think about sort of the scandal, it's because they were like funding the Contras and they were giving them weapons during an embargo. So they used the banking system in Panama as like a backdoor, and Noriega was the dictator, so he was like the buck stopped with him, but all of that stuff was backdoored through this sort of like this like banking system that allowed money to come from foreign governments and be washed through Panama and released out into Central America, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense, and it's still relevant today.
Still relevant today. Yeah, look up the Panama Papers. It happened, I think, in 2017.
Panama Papers
2016.
are 11.5 million leaked documents of data published beginning April 2016. The papers detail financial and attorney-client information for more than 214,000 offshore entities. These documents, some dating back to the 70s, were created by and taken from the former Panamanian offshore law firm and corporate services provider Mossack Forensica, and compiled with similar leaks into searchable databases.
Holy crap, 11 million?
Yeah, it's really nuts, dude. So this
Links to Russian intelligence?
yeah, I told you I met with a Russian spy in Panama like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
It's still, dude, it's all still going on today, and it's not like directly related to Iran-Contra, but it's like a trickle. It's like it's trickling down through the years, and it's still quite relevant. You know, you see that it says these documents date back to the 1970s when the banking system was introduced.
Yeah.
It intensified in the 1980s when Noriega was the dictator, and there was a lot of illicit stuff going on, and continues to this very day.
Yeah. I guess that's their biggest problem, right? Like, how do we hide money? How do we fund covert ops and hide and wash money and do it without Congress knowing or without the public knowing about it? I mean, you got it. That's the easiest way to track what's going on and all the fucking malicious things that are happening around the world is just follow the money.
Yeah.
But if you can figure out a way to hide the money, then you can get away with anything, get away with murder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that seems to be what Jeffrey Epstein was really involved with, was moving around money for people. You know, he could have been doing that for multiple countries and multiple people. Just figuring out ways, creative ways to hide people's money, wash people's money, invest it in weird NGOs and get things done.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah. Hard to say. I really don't know. I wish I knew more about that. I wish the world knew more about that. People are dying for that information, but somebody is withholding it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we'll never know. We'll never find out. They'll never let us know. I don't think there's any one person who does know.
I don't think so either.
You know?
Yeah.
It's probably also stovepiped, and there's Like imagine if there was one person that was alive today that knew the truth about all these secrets.
Yeah.
About Kennedy, about 9/11, about the war on drugs.
Yeah.
About all these crazy assassinations and scandals that have ever happened. I can't imagine that. I mean, I don't know. First of all, I don't know how you would go through life holding that information to yourself and like living a normal life if you had a family or something like that.
Yeah. Well, delusion, compartmentalization is a big thing with these guys. I saw it with Carlos, you know, I mentioned earlier, Carlos has like 8 kids. He was relatively present in their lives. Like he took them on vacations.
Really?
Dude, he took them on vacations, trips. You know, he was a father, but he was able to compartmentalize being an intelligence agent, being an enforcer, very much an enforcer. You know, like I've spoken, and you have too, I know, with a lot of people that, you know, you have on here. Like there are people that you've had on here that have murdered people or killed people, right? I've spoken in my line of work, I've spoken with so many murderers, so many, and couple, like Carlos didn't, you know, divulge this to me, but like you could probably label him as like a mass killer, right? He's probably killed like a lot of people. But these guys were able to compartmentalize that through delusion and through belief. And it's, you know, belief or conviction. Like they feel convicted in their beliefs. And it's almost like morals like aren't really like in question. And it stems back to what that guy Richard Coster told me in Panama, that reality doesn't exist, it's realities. And there are people that can jump between their own realities, right? And that's really just what compartmentalization is. Like you're jumping between realities. So I just think these guys, like you say, like how can they live with themselves and how can they do this, like knowing all this stuff? They
tell themselves stories. So
they're delusional.
Yeah.
You know, they make themselves delusional.
Well, you would have to do that. You'd have to use that as a tool for yourself, like psychologically trick yourself so you could actually live with yourself and sleep at night.
Yeah.
You know, make yourself believe. Tell yourself a story that helps you feel better about it or makes you feel like you're doing the right thing. I think I think you're right about that. I think that's the way you have to do it. I
think that's just what I think these guys do. Thankfully, you and I are not in that sort of position where we don't fully understand or like know what that feels like, but I would imagine that it's extremely stressful. There's a reason why these guys are so high strung and volatile.
Yes, that's a good point. The US and China are playing tug of war with a lot of these countries down there. And you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Venezuela. But like they're all over China's all over Mexico too.
Oh, really? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, they got mining operations, mining lithium down there, and they're hiring the cartels and using them as security for those mining operations because they're producing tons and tons of batteries in China.
Wow.
And they're also they're working with the cartels in some capacity too. I'm not sure exactly how, but and then there's the fishing stuff too. They're doing all kinds of crazy illegal fishing all down the coast of Central and South America. And Mexico, but you know, right here in our own backyard, you know, right south of us, it's crazy. They're everywhere.
Yeah, it is nuts. It's like the like the Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese have.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that? I was going to use the word infected. That's a really negative word, but
what word?
Infected.
Infected.
Yeah, because it's like it spreads, right? It's like. But that's a very like American nationalist thing to say, so it's the wrong word to use, but it sort of is the case. But in Panama, the Chinese, like before BlackRock bought them back again, they owned the ports on either side of the Panama Canal, which is why Trump went after the canal. That's why he was very, I guess like publicly he was very like outspoken in the public about retaking the Panama Canal back into Americans' hands.
Right.
The reason why he did that is because the Chinese just owned the ports at either side. So in theory, there was a threat that they could sort of like stop what was coming through, or they could at least have an influence of what was coming through and what wasn't. Part of the Canal Treaty of 1977 stated that if there ever was a threat to like American security because of the Panama Canal, the Americans could take back control of the canal.
Right.
That's like in the treaty. So, so yeah.
Yeah, China's everywhere, man. They're I'm sure their spy operation is. We don't hear about it very often. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you really hear about the CIA and the Mossad and a little bit of the FSB, but you don't hear much about China's spy operation. I forget what it's called, but they're everywhere. They're all over. They're all throughout the United States. I'm sure there's probably dozens of undeclared, probably hundreds of undeclared spies in the U.S. And like, you know, they buy up our land. They got caught recently having like police stations where they were arresting their own citizens in the U.S. Did you hear about this? This was crazy. We had that lady that we had come in here a couple months ago, Steve, was telling us about this, where they had, I think it was in New York and all along the East Coast and maybe in California as well. But basically they were kidnapping, arresting, and I don't know what they were doing to them, but they were basically essentially Chinese Americans who were caught speaking negatively about China or something like this. And, you know, they were fucking arresting them illegally in the U.S., which is crazy. And that was a huge bust that went down. Yeah. Admits running secret Chinese police station in New York City.
Dude, that is crazy. Holy shit.
Yeah, dude. It's bananas.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I can't say I know too much about it, but it's definitely like the covert sort of operation that these major nations
They're very
have.
advanced, man.
Super advanced, dude.
People don't realize there's like, China is such an old culture. It's been, there's buildings in China that are 4 times older than the United States.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Dude, it is crazy. Yeah. The United States hasn't really been around for that long.
No.
There are pubs in Ireland that are older than the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you think about it, you know? But like, yeah, I don't know. I think that it's kind of crazy too how it seems like the people that run this country are envious of China in a way.
You think so?
You know, they use like communists. The communists are the bad guys, and but like, I think the people that ultimately run this place want to turn it into China. They want this to be some sort of a complete surveillance, lockdown police state.
Yeah.
It just looks like it's going that way.
It does look like it's going that way more and more every day, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it really does.
Like, I spent the last month in Panama, and even just the general feeling, the atmosphere of things is just completely different to being in the US.
I bet.
Completely different. You know, you have, well, obviously I'm Irish, so I'm biased against the UK. Not a huge fan of the UK and their government, but like that country is going to complete shit. Like there's a really famous Irish TV show from back in the day called Father Ted, and one of the creators tweeted about like anti-trans messaging or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what he said, but when he landed in the UK, they arrested.
This was recent, right?
Yeah, it's pretty recent.
That guy was on Joe Rogan, I think. Like
really?
A couple of days before that.
No way.
Yeah, he was a TV writer, I think.
Yeah,
and
he was.
He landed there and they arrested him.
He did. Yeah, the TV show is called Father Ted. It's like beloved in Ireland. It's like a comedy, but
I saw a video yesterday of the police were arresting a veteran, a British Army veteran or something like this. They had him in his driveway. They had him handcuffed, and he's like, "How are you doing this to me? How are you arresting me for something that I reposted on Facebook? I didn't even write that. I just re-Facebooked it or whatever the hell you call it."
Yeah.
And the police officer, this is all on camera. The police officer literally says to him, he goes, "You caused a lot of anxiety to the people that had to view that and had to experience your views."
Wow. Yeah. It's getting really scary.
Yeah, Graham.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Graham.
Yep. Father Ted.
Yeah.
Yeah, at London Heathrow very recently. He was on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, he was literally on Rogan like a week before that happened.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Jesus, dude. Yeah. And that was a really big deal in Ireland. And then he, you might be able to pull up the picture, Steve, but he showed up for his like court date with like I forget those things. It's like a plaque that you put, I forget what it's called, but he basically had all this writing on this piece of cardboard like over his chest, and he was like, you know, countering the sort of like the arrest and just saying like, this is ridiculous. because it really is.
It's crazy.
But the UK has gone really sort of crazy, and I think the US is not really too far behind.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is either.
Yeah, this exactly.
Keep men out of women's sports.
I don't know what those are called, but yeah.
Yeah, what did he post? He posted something like keep biological men out of women's bathrooms or something like that. That was what he posted.
Yeah.
Like whatever he posted, it was not like inciting violence. It was not doxing anybody. It was like, I forget what the tweets were. Maybe you can find the actual tweets, Steve. But they weren't crazy at all, you know?
I'll tell you a story that was relayed to me that I heard multiple times from several different people. So I think it's true because all the facts remain the same. But there was, in 1971, the CIA hired a Galician from Spain. This dude who essentially, you know, was a you could call him a terrorist, right? He was this mass murderer. And they hired this guy to go to Cuba and to take out all of these guerrillas in this fishing town, these like Cuban guerrillas that I don't know what they were planning, but obviously something against the United States. The CIA got word of it. So this guy, his last name was Villa. He was referred to as Comandante Villa. Comandante Villa comes into this fishing town, and instead of, you know, spending whatever amount of time to figure out who these guerrillas are, he just opened fires on this small fishing town, killing everybody in it. Mass murders the entire town. Wow. Right? The Cubans, Castro's guys, capture him before he can get away, and he's held in, you know, Castro's cells. Right? Very close. This guy's not going anywhere. So the CIA call Manuel Noriega, and they're like, hey, we need you to go to Cuba and get this guy out of jail. And Noriega, from what Carlos told me, was like, how do you want me to do that? Like, this guy murdered like a bunch of innocent civilians in Cuba. Like, Castro's not going to let him get away. And the CIA were basically just like, do it. Convince him, right? Convince him to do it. So Noriega flies to Cuba. He sits down with Castro and they have a conversation. And Castro's like, why are you doing this for the CIA, man? Like, don't you want Panama to be Panama? And Noriega's like, I need to make sure that, like, I'm feeding the white bear, right? So that it doesn't attack me, right? That's the way it was put. So they work out a deal where Noriega can essentially take Comandante Villa out of the cell and send him back to the CIA. And in return, Castro gets information from Noriega about CIA dealings, right? But this is a case of a literal mass murderer being let back into the CIA's hands just because it served a purpose. And this was in 1971. Can you imagine the amount of times something like that has happened? Like, think about like the Middle East, where like I really don't know anything. My knowledge really pertains to Central America and Latin America during the Cold War, during this specific period right up until 1990. But dude, like starting with the Gulf War and extending on to Afghanistan and all this sort of stuff. Like, can you imagine the amount of like deals that are made between intelligence agencies and like Al-Qaeda and people. Whatnot? Evil fucking people, dude, just to serve a greater purpose.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Practicality trumps morals when it comes to intelligence people all day. And that's, you know, when these intelligence agencies vet people to work for them, that's one of the things that they test them for. Like, are you willing to like subvert any ideology or any moral beliefs that you have in order to achieve like the greater purpose of what the objective is of this mission, right? And like there was this guy's John Kiriakou, who's former CIA officer, who worked in the Middle East, who's a part of capturing a lot of the people that worked for bin Laden. You know, he was explaining to me that one of his agents that he recruited in the Middle East was just like this dude who was always getting prostitutes and like, you know, he always wanted prostitutes, right? So he's like, if you want information from me, you got to, you know, bring me a prostitute or whatever. Bring me girls. I need girls or even like men or whatever. Like this guy didn't give a fuck. So he's like, if this is what I have to do to get information, this is what I'll do. Right. John eventually blew the whistle on the CIA's torture program and they sent him to prison. So they fucked up when they picked him. Like this guy was not the right guy, but a normal CIA agent or a Mossad agent or you name the intelligence agency, like even if this guy wanted children, they would get him children as
Yeah.
long as it meant getting intelligence on the people that they wanted intelligence on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's no moral. And like, think about it. If you are a small nation that exists in this part of the world surrounded by enemies, there's always an existential threat.
Mm-hmm.
And you only have 2 to 3 million people in your population. Are you willing to sacrifice children to ensure the survival of your race and your people and your country into the future? Right?
A lot of these places are going to say yes.
Jeffrey Epstein,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, the guy was obviously working for multiple intelligence agencies, doing some of like the most abhorrent things with trafficking children all around the world to all these rich and powerful people. And, you know, I think that it's pretty obvious that it was a blackmail operation. And I think that Israel and the CIA had to have been involved in it. And I think if you're the CIA or if you're the Mossad, you're saying like, is it a reasonable thing? Not like tinfoil hat. Like, is this a reasonable idea that this guy would be trafficking underage kids to these rich and powerful people to get blackmail on them so you can control them and so that you can ensure the survival of your country and your race? Like, I think that's a totally reasonable thing to suggest.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck,
Yeah.
then it's probably a duck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
That's what people say. But
Yeah.
I also think that people are a lot smarter than they give themselves credit for, right? Like, I think the mass. I'm stealing this from a movie, but like, a person is smart, people are stupid, right? The masses, they follow trends, they follow narratives. You know, the news is all about narrative, but I think an individual person can feel it in their gut when something isn't right. So you talk about Epstein and like all this stuff, like, you know, like, you feel it in your gut that something's up, right? You don't know the facts. You don't, like, you can't look behind those closed doors, but like, something stinks, right?
Yeah.
Something smells
Yeah.
there. But you, like, we'll never truly know. You know what I mean? Like,
right. No.
there are too many powers at play. And then, you know, you have like, and then like, there are tiers to intelligence, right? There are things that we're supposed to know and things that we're not supposed to know, and then things that get washed away over the course of history. You know, there are things like I talk about like having these confidential documents that show this correspondence between Noriega and the DEA and DOJ and CIA and all these different agencies. Like, what was said that wasn't documented? That's what I've always wanted to know. So that's when I go to Panama, when I meet all of these people who are in these rooms and I'm working off pure testimony. Like, there are two sides to every story, or rather there are multiple sides to every story. But for instance, I hear somebody be like, oh yeah, in 1976, George H.W. Bush, you know, tells Noriega that he gets pissed off at Noriega in a meeting and he says, you're going to regret that, right? That's what this guy tells me. And then I think about that and I'm like, you know, I could see that happening. I was like, I know for a fact that they butted heads. I know for a fact that they fucking hated each other. It's like, I could see the director of the CIA making a threat to an intelligence asset who thought he was more important than he actually was. And then when that intelligence asset continues to do things that he's not supposed to do, the director of the CIA or former director of the CIA putting his foot down and being like, you're going to pay for that.
Right.
Just for that, I'm going to invade your country with 27,000 troops and bomb the shit out of your civilians.
Right.
And then not only am I going to do that, but we're going to say that 300 people died when in fact we don't know how many people died. Thousands. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there's this great documentary called The Panama Deception. It won the best documentary at the Oscars in 1993. This woman, Barbara Trent, wrote it. Fantastic documentary.
Panama Deception.
Yeah, The Panama Deception. And 1993 Oscars, maybe 92. But you know, she got in trouble for it and whatever. But in the documentary, the claim is made that the U.S. military used their military exercise of the invasion of Panama as a chance to Yeah, exactly. This is the documentary here. 92. They use it as a chance to test weapons on Panamanian civilians. So I interviewed a lot of people and soldiers who claimed that they saw like these like the U.S. Army shooting lasers at Panamanian soldiers, and that like their guns like melted to their body when they got like hit with these lasers, dude. And this is in like 1989. Like, there's a lot of funky shit out there that there are testimonies of, but documentation will never exist. So who's like, will we ever know the truth? Like, truly. We can talk about it, and our guts can tell us that something is fishy, and if there's smoke, there's fire, and all this sort of shit. But will we ever have documentation? Will we ever have like actual, real, true proof? Like,
no, I'm sure.
I doubt it.
I'm sure the most sinister shit that the government has done, I'm sure they make it. They make it a point to make sure none of that shit is documented.
Yeah.
Or ever talked about, and people go to their graves with that stuff. Have you gone down the rabbit hole on all the Charlie Kirk stuff?
I have. Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
It's funny. I actually, so when I was in, it happened while I was in Panama, but I met this guy, this former CIA agent in Panama, who's like, now he's like a conspiracy kook. He lives in the woods, and he covers his house in aluminum foil so that like satellites can't see him. He's like one of those guys, right? And I met him for breakfast. I was introduced to him, and we chatted for like a couple hours, and then a couple days later the Kirk assassination happened, and this guy's been like blowing up my WhatsApp every day with like conspiracy theory stuff. But he he was like trained, he was like a US military guy. Then he became a spy in Central America, and then he's got all this crazy experience, but he has like severe PTSD. But he's sending me all this stuff, and he literally sends me like numerical lists of like all the things that are wrong with it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Like I don't even hunt. You know what I mean? I've shot a gun like once in my life, but it just like it goes back to like that gut thing, right? It's like my gut tells me that like there's something fishy as fuck.
Yeah.
Something smells. You know what I mean? Like something doesn't smell right, and then you got like Kash Patel. Like
they're pressuring the government in Utah to wrap it up and seal the investigation.
It's like it really just feels like we got our excuse, and now we're not allowed to ask questions, and let's just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, the craziest thing to me is like all the gun enthusiasts and like the former military people online and that I've talked to who say that like there's no way that gun created that hole in his neck. Like a 30-06 round would absolutely have an exit wound, and there was clearly no exit wound. And if it didn't have an exit wound, it would completely explode inside of it. Like his head would be gone, or his neck would be gone if that was really that from that kind of a round.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing is that kid. I don't care how. I mean, even if he trained for 6 months practicing with a blindfold, taking that weapon apart, after you pull off that shot, like under that amount of stress, there's no possible way he would have been able to break down that rifle. You need so many tools. You need an Allen key. You need screwdrivers. You need all these other little tools to disassemble that rifle. And it's still not going to fit in that fucking backpack.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was like running off the roof immediately after, and like it just does, none of that stuff adds up. And then reassembled it so he could hide it in a towel in the woods.
Yeah.
None of this story is making any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, dude. Even like that like old man who after the shot was
did
like,
you see the footage of him?
No. What are you referring to?
Well, so there's the footage of him, like his like pants fell off, first of all, like right after. But if you watch the footage, there's a camera of the crowd right when the Charlie was hit, and like everyone gets down, and immediately when everyone's still on the ground, he stands up and starts waving his hands around like this, like he knew this was gonna happen.
Yeah. And it's all like,
and then they charge him with child porn.
Exactly.
So that you can't ask him questions anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just about to bring that up because it's a
and he was there at 9/11. He was there during the Boston bombing.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, dude, it's like I just don't understand. I don't understand like how that it's coincidence doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
There's a before and after Gaza.
Wow.
Rafah. Look at that shit, dude.
That's fucking shocking. That's fucking shocking.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, there you go.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's like it's like they almost knew that you can't pull off this lie in today's day and age with cameras rolling everywhere, not only security cameras, but iPhone cameras rolling everywhere, and like cover up a lone shooter that assassinated Charlie Kirk. Like, people are going to get to the bottom of this. So it's like almost you have to throw in all these confusing little tidbits everywhere just to throw people off the scent and make everybody confused.
Right. I feel like
you have to create this cauldron of bullshit, right?
Yeah.
That just people talk about and talk about and talk about until maybe eventually it'll fizzle out when people give up and no one talks anymore, and none of the people in the government investigate it anymore, and like eventually, you know, they'll just label them like kooks like they did with the 9/11 people.
Totally. But you got to think as well, like, I feel like guys like us, or like the general public, people who don't have, like, we don't have the lenses to go behind these closed doors, behind the veil, and to really understand what's happening. But you got to start with the outcome. Like, what is the outcome of this? And you got to think about why, you know? So I don't know if we've experienced what the outcome truly is yet, right? I think we're building towards it. But like you talk about, like the 9/11 conspiracies and all the questions that are asked, like, what was the outcome of 9/11? Like, we invaded these countries in the Middle East. You know what I mean?
Well, there's footage of Netanyahu after 9/11 saying something. Find out what his exact quote was. But Netanyahu was quoted, and I think it's actually recorded, where he says that this is a really good thing for us.
I did see that recently. Yeah, he's like talking to those like students or those kids in that room, right? Yeah, I saw that. But it, like, you know, it was a good thing for Israel.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, it got us
You know
over
what I mean?
there.
Totally. Yeah. Like it was. So, I mean, I feel like when I put on like my little investigator cap, what I immediately do is I go to the outcome. I was like, what ended up happening? And then you work your way back. Because if you start with the inciting incident, like, there are fucking so many different directions that you can go. Like, the inciting incident here is the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? You've got like Republicans, not like all obviously, but a lot of Republicans being like, this is the far left trans movement that are doing this. And that's the story that like Kash Patel and the FBI are going with, right?
That was almost the instant narrative.
Exactly. The instant narrative, which you'd be a fool to believe that, I think. Did you read those text messages?
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck was that? Dude, what was that? But like, nobody
I have to
bought
go
it.
retrieve the weapon, and there's a squad car still sitting here waiting. What fucking 21-year-old talks like that?
Who bought that? Nobody bought that. You know what I mean? So, like, these are all just narratives that are being created. But like I said, like, I don't think we've arrived at the outcome that was intended for that. Like, even let's say that it was like a trans thing, right? Like, what is the outcome? Is the ultimate outcome just like Charlie Kirk is dead? No more hate speech? No.
Well, for sure, a lot of people really hated him. A lot of young people really hated him and probably thought it was a good thing. That, I mean, obviously people are like cheering about it and like
which is fucked.
and saying that it's a really good thing, stomping on his memorial and all that shit. But like, fuck, man. He was a really divisive figure. I mean, he was moderate. I mean, he wasn't extreme. He wasn't like a Nick Fuentes. He wasn't like a fucking Nazi. He was like fairly reasonable on most of his takes. He had a lot of shit I didn't fucking agree with, but a lot of shit I did agree with. But like, he was arguing. His job was to go out to these universities and argue with kids that disagree with him on all the most hot button topics that exist in society. And you're doing that in a huge open area with tons of people all over the country. And I'm sure you don't have Secret Service covering every roof all the time. So like, there's something, I don't know, maybe it's just me, because, you know, I have a fucking wife and 3 kids. It's not on my priority list. In fact, I'm going to go out of my way to not be in public in front of hundreds of people that probably despise me. Yeah. You know, there's just, I don't know, maybe it's like a DNA, something in my DNA. I just have an instinct that maybe I shouldn't do that. And if I did do that and like my livelihood depended on it, I would imagine that I would have fucking tons of security. You know, it was a really risky thing he was doing for sure.
Incredibly risky thing. Yeah, it really was. And
it's just the whole theater behind it all is so weird. And Netanyahu going on the news immediately, like dude, the dude obviously can't read a room anymore. You know, like if you're the one that everyone is blaming for this, You don't go out and say, hey, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. You don't want to be the first one to go out and say, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you rob a bank and someone's like, and people are saying, oh, it could be this person, this could be this person, you don't go to, hey, it wasn't me. I promise it wasn't me. Like, that's not what you do.
Dude, no.
It's psychology 101.
Yeah. Something stinks, right? And everybody knows it.
Yeah.
But like.
And on the same day, I think Congress blocked the Epstein files.
They did. I saw that on like on X, you know, and but you gotta, I don't know, you just gotta think like, what was the intended outcome by the person or people who did this? Have we arrived there yet? If we have, let's start there and work back as to answer the question why. You know what I mean? Because that's what everybody really wants to know.
Yeah.
We know how, you know, we know when, but we don't know why. You know, and that it just like, this video, or like he posted like 6 videos, right? Or like multiple videos being like, Israel did not do this. Like, this is crazy to think like Charlie was pro-Israel. But then you got Candace Owens, you know, doing all these live streams being like, Charlie turned on Israel like weeks before, and they offered him this amount of money.
Well, there was that I guess he had that meeting with that billionaire a day before he went on some live stream with Megyn Kelly, and like he was ranting about how like they're trying to control and bully him and intimidate him and all this stuff, and how that's gonna just force people like him to speak out more about, you know, all the crazy shit Israel's doing to influence the United States and us giving them money and funding their wars and all that stuff. And I guess like, because he was very pro-Israel his whole career, like very, very pro-Israel, you know, mainly from a religious perspective, because he was like a huge Christian. But, you know, it is obvious that he was like starting, I think when he invited Tucker, he did something in Tampa. He did a thing like 30 minutes away from here in Tampa with Tucker Carlson, and he had Dave Smith on there to do a debate with some pro-Israel guy. And I guess that was kind of like the biggest turning point, no pun intended, on like his pushback from his Israeli donors. And you know, he had $100 million in donors, like people that were billionaires that were huge Zionists. So like, you know, and he pissed a lot of people off. And Bill Ackman was the guy who she was trying to say was like a part of this like bullying intimidation campaign that invited him. And that's just a crazy thing too. Like the whole Bill Ackman Zionist thing aside, bullying, if he was or what, whether he was or was not like trying to bully Charlie into stopping all the Israel talk, like he just like straight up admitted in his long Twitter rant that he was inviting all these influencers and bragging how he had influencers with over 100 million total subscribers or followers to talk to them about politics in the United States.
Huh. Really?
Like you just admitted that, but you didn't. I mean, like, it's kind of like out in plain sight now. Like, why are you doing that?
Right.
Why is some Zionist billionaire trying to invite all these influencers to a private party in the Hamptons to talk about political influence in the US?
Interesting.
That in itself is fucking crazy.
It is, dude.
And no one talks about that.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Wow. Jesus.
Yeah, dude.
It's a rabbit hole, dude. It's a rabbit hole. We're never going to know the real true answer because there's no documentation that's going to exist about it. And if it does, it's probably been shredded or manipulated or something like that, because it's just, dude, it's a conspiracy at the end of the day. Like it's a huge deal. Like I see a lot of people being like, why are we doing this for a podcast or this and that? He was incredibly influential. Like he turned the minds of millions of people. I remember I was a college freshman in 2015 at Northeastern University in Boston, an extremely, like, it was a very liberal school. Like everyone I went to school with was a Democrat, but my roommate was like a right-wing guy. And I remember him in like 2015, 2016 probably being like, have you ever heard of Charlie Kirk? He's got this turning point thing. It's awesome. Right. And he was like, he was like a Charlie Kirk fan for like years, right? Like way before all of this like TikTok social media stuff like exploded. So, I mean, he was a very influential voice in the Republican movement for so long. It just makes me ask the question, like, what? Like, why? Like, who really benefits from this? You know what I mean? Like, we talked about JFK. Like, what are the conspiracies there? That the mob did it, that it was the CIA that did it, that Israel did it. Like, there are multiple different conspiracies, right? I don't think anybody believes that it was just like the lone gunman theory, right? I think that's been mostly disproven or discredited. But you got to think like, what was the outcome of that? You know, like what was the reason? What was the outcome?
Continuing wars.
Yeah, I'm not like extremely well versed in that whole thing, but I do know that the lone gunman thing just doesn't make sense. Like, why? Why?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, what is the outcome? Because killing Charlie Kirk, somebody's going to replace him, right? I know they said that Ben Shapiro's going to replace him, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I think that's just Twitter anti-Semitism.
You know, it's like it's kind of like the Hydra. You know, you cut the head off and like two or three grow back. So I don't think it makes sense that like you can kill Charlie Kirk and you're gonna basically everyone's gonna forget about this movement, or like no one's gonna take his place, right? I think that's kind of naive.
Yeah,
but it has created a huge fucking shitstorm of conspiracies and videos and people talking about it. Like it took over the news cycle. It's still taking over the news cycle, right?
Yeah.
And like what's going on behind the scenes that we're missing now because everyone's paying attention to the Charlie Kirk thing.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways you can look at it. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I don't think anybody in the general public does, but let's pick an outcome and work back. Like, let's say there, I see things online about it, Charlie Kirk's assassination being like an intentional creation of a martyr for the Republican Party, right? Let's look at that outcome.
Right.
Martyr, work its way back. Like, what does that do? Does that drive more voters to keep Republicans in power? Like, who knows? I just think that we'll ultimately get to the outcome that was designed from this, and then we'll have a better idea of why it happened. But I just think right now it's just like,
well, for one thing's for sure,
crazy.
It's making Israel look terrible. Making, at least not Israel, it's making Netanyahu and his government look terrible, and it's making Trump look terrible. You know, like the fucking video of Trump, they're asking him about his good friend Charlie Kirk's like, oh great, how about my new ballroom?
Yeah,
like,
that was tough.
You know,
yeah,
like, and all the other things. It's just and the Jimmy Kimmel thing, like that, with Trump trying to pressure them to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel, and then him, you know, off that joke that was actually pretty funny. It wasn't even about Charlie Kirk. It was about Trump.
Right.
The joke was like, what was it, like the fourth stage of grief is construction, like my ballroom, like it was a, you know, it was a little sensitive. It's a sensitive subject because he did it like 4 days after.
Yeah.
But like still, it was a funny joke. It wasn't about Charlie. He was making fun of. He was ripping on Trump. So like I went back and watched the whole thing just to like make sure I wasn't missing anything. And you know, that's another thing that people don't understand about like the government trying to control the fucking media and pushing the FCC, using the FCC because they were trying to like merge with this other company, Nexstar, I think it was trying to do this merger where they controlled like 80% of the television, the telecom communications for those channels across the US, when the FCC guidelines is you can't have more than 30% coverage.
Interesting.
Now they were going to have 80.
Huh.
But they needed like the White House to sign off on changing these FCC regulations, and then Trump's pushing to get him off the air, then magically he gets taken off the air, and then like the people revolt, he gets back on the air, and it just fucking exposed just this insane rot that exists. You know?
Definitely.
And then like it just, people don't, that's one thing that you have to step back and like understand is like this censorship shit goes way beyond left and right, because if the right imposes a bunch of censorship and then the left gets in power, they're just going to take that and run with it and then impose more censorship. And before you know it, we're living in China.
Huh. Wow.